It's a delight for me to be here. I'm grateful for all four witnesses, but I will give you some bias that Mr. Derek Miller from Utah, particularly pleased to be here with you. Thanks to all of you for making this trip, and Derek, thanks for coming. I don't think it would be, hopefully Mr. Chairman wouldn't be out of line if I gave a shout out to Mr. Miller's family, who has accompanied him on this trip and is here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Miller, you've served as a CEO for the Salt Lake Chamber. You're serving now in that role. You've served as a CEO for the World Trade Center. You were the Chief of Staff to the Governor of our state. You've spent some time back here. Thank you for bringing all those qualifications with you today to answer some of these questions. It makes me really proud to come from Utah, where we're doing so many things right, but need to continue to improve, especially for our small businesses. We're really proud of the work we've done with deregulation. Could you speak to how important it is that we don't overregulate, particularly our small businesses? And in addition, what else can we be doing here in Washington for our small businesses?
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. It's great to be here with you and the other members of the committee. And I shared the story about the email already, and I think there may be some who would think, you know, come on, that's a small thing. You know, being able to email a business license instead of having to send it by U.S. Postal Service, and it's true. It is a small thing, but I guess the point that I want to make is that small things matter a lot to small businesses. Small businesses bear a disproportionate share of the burden when it comes to regulations, because often they're either a family-owned business or a sole proprietor. They don't have resources. They don't have time to hire an army of lawyers to go out and study this stuff. They don't have the resources or the time to have compliance officers in their business. They're just working hard every single day to try to be a successful business, live the American dream for themselves and their family. And so you asked the question, what could the federal government do? I think it'd be a great place to start by doing what we did in Utah, which is to look at those regulations. It doesn't have to be political, it doesn't have to be partisan, but those that are just simply outdated. Those small things add up to be a very large burden to our small businesses.
I appreciate you pointing that out. Sometimes we think, well, they can just send that off to another department to have it done, right? And that's usually...
They are the other department.
They are the other department. We're experiencing an unusual economy in Utah and have for a number of years. Your unemployment in the Salt Lake Valley is 3% or maybe slightly less than 3%, and in Utah County. A lot of my district is rural, and in some places we're in double-digit unemployment. Can you address your thoughts on what can we do and how can we team with you and local leaders to help the rural economy and the rural small business owners?
Sure, thank you for that question. So when we went out on our 25K jobs tour, we discovered a couple of things. The first one is we have some parts of our state where the greatest challenge for the business is finding qualified workforce. That is their #1 top challenge. Yet we go out to some of the rural counties in our state, and their greatest challenge is finding jobs. Okay, well, you know, I don't claim to be a genius, but I can at least add 2 and 2. And when you do put 2 and 2 together, what you realize is that there are opportunities, especially in today's economy with so many of the tech businesses that you represent in your district, Congressman, who they have jobs that don't need to be located at headquarters, whatever headquarters means. There's an opportunity to take those jobs either by telecommuting or other technology, so that we are leading an effort right now that is part of Governor Herbert's 25,000 jobs goal to challenge our businesses that are part of the Salt Lake Chamber, challenge them to do a thorough review of the jobs that they currently have unfilled, to identify which of those jobs don't need to be located along the Wasatch Front or our urban core, and then we will help them connect with the local chambers of commerce and work with them to match the unfilled job with the person in those rural communities who is looking for a job.
I hope you'll consider me and my colleagues partners in this, whether it's nothing more than the bully pulpit or facilitating or work that we can actually do here, but I definitely want to be a partner in that goal. It's a great goal. Lastly, you described in your testimony that the trade is not hurting Utah, but actually helping. Could you elaborate on that and talk about why and how that's so important in the state of Utah?
Sure. Utah, as I mentioned, is a trade state. If we were only selling to our 3 million citizens, we would not be seeing the economic success that we are. Nevertheless, We recognize that free trade is good, but it has to be fair trade. So we believe that, and we believe that Congress also ought to assert its role in making sure that, for example, NAFTA is modernized. If we are going to pull out to other trade agreements like the TPP or the TTIP, then let's put something in its place. Our small businesses need rules-based trading. Again, they don't have the opportunity to go out and make those deals on their own. They look to the U.S. government. They look to you, members of Congress, to go establish their rules for them that will give them the predictability and the stability they will need to continue to be successful.
You know, I was a small business owner before, and I can't tell you how many times I said to myself and my partners, why don't they get this in Washington, right? So I'd like to give all four of you a moment to say, what is it that you would like to express that you talk about around the coffee and saying, I wish in Washington they got this one thing, in New York and Virginia and Missouri and Utah. Is there something that you would like me and my colleagues to hear? Let's start with Mr. Miller from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. So we've talked about regulatory reform and we've talked about trade deals. Let me hit what I think is the other of the big three, and that is immigration reform. That's a hot topic in Washington, D.C. right now. It's important to Utah, as you know, as someone who owned a business in Utah. We need those qualified workers. We need them to be part of not just our agricultural businesses, but we need them to be part of our tech businesses, our manufacturing businesses, all up and down the line. Utah is a state, as you know, that was founded by refugees, religious refugees, who at the time they got there were outside of the United States, had been driven out. And so we're a state that's very sensitive to that topic, not just from a business issue, but from a cultural and a moral issue as well. And so immigration reform would be so critical to keeping the good thing that we have going in Utah going.
That's also very timely. Mr. Pristeman.
My observation would be one size fits all regulation that applies equally to a company of 5,000 employees to a company with 5 is a recipe for big problems. I hear far more about navigating regulatory burdens than I do about high taxes. Not that there's not a need for continued attention to tax burden, but I think regulatory burden is the main thing. And I can only imagine the difficulty of crafting rules that work in that environment. But that is a persistent complaint that you'll hear about. It's pretty much to your point. If you're a really small business, you can't just hand this over to the regulatory division either. Yeah. You're that too.
I'm often out among businesses and I say, well, how'd you like tax reform? And they say, well, that was nice, but what's really helped is deregulation.
That would be what I've heard too.
Yeah, Ms. Wagner.
For the clients I serve, which are a lot of technology startups, the biggest challenge they have overcoming is the attraction of tech talent and the availability of that. So investment in our technology workforce, both in uptraining and upskilling the current workforce, as well as investing in our next generation of technology employment, is probably the biggest concern facing many of my clients today.
Thank you. Mr. Bishop.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and say I have two things.
I'd love to hear both.
And certainly you've heard it from Mr. Miller, the importance of immigrations and New York City, as I said, is powered by immigrant entrepreneurs. And certainly we want to make sure that we create opportunities for immigrants to create businesses, because those businesses will hire within their communities. And I want to stress that. It's so important. It's important to New York City's economy. The other thing that I said that I wanted to make sure that you understand is that the success of American businesses is dependent on our workforce. And we have to make sure that our workforce is prepared for the technologies of tomorrow. And in certain areas, they're not. And certainly we have to make sure we've made investments in New York City to ensure, either through apprenticeship programs or working with industry, to identify and project in the next 3 to 5 years what are the skill sets that those companies need in order to grow. As if they're not going to, if we as a country can't provide the workforce, then they're going to go to other countries that can. And certainly we need to make sure that our education system provides the pipeline of the next engineers, the next computer programmers, et cetera. So that's very important for the success of our small businesses.
Those were 4 great messages. We need to make sure all our colleagues hear all 4 of those. So thank you very much for your time today, and I yield my time.